We have some good news, folks, about the fourth stimulus check that you want to know. So be sure to stay until the end of the video. So Joe Biden just announced a new date for when the multi-trillion-dollar social spending bill will finally pass in Congress. So $1,200 stimulus checks, everybody, might be going out to thousands of Americans tomorrow. Get ready for the most important stimulus news that you have to know. So Joe Biden indicated today that he and Democrats likely will not meet their goal of passing his roughly $2 trillion spending bill by the...
Now to Capitol Hill, where there are growing signs that Senate Democrats may be temporarily giving up hope of passing the president's human infrastructure bill by New Year's. Instead, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wants to focus on a totally different issue, a massively important one: voting rights. Let's bring in NBC's Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, walk us through what has happened here. It was all about a Christmas deadline for Build Back Better. Now that's temporarily on hold and voting rights is in focus. Why?
Stephanie, what's happening is Congress appears likely to blow through yet another self-imposed deadline on the Build Back Better Act. The Christmas timeline is coming and going without Democrats being properly prepared to get this done in time. They still have policy differences to negotiate. There are still provisions in the bill that they need to get all 50 Democrats on board, and more recently, Senator Manchin has raised concerns with the structure of certain expiring provisions in the bill, things like the child tax credit, which expire in a year, and he assumes they're going to be extended, and he wants them to be funded over the long haul, over 10 years. There's no real easy fix to that, and President Biden and Chuck Schumer have not been able to impress upon him their goal of getting this bill done soon. As a result, they're not going to be able to get this to the parliamentarian and get through the...
He said it would be finished over the next days and weeks and focuses on other things. By the way, Senator Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are also considered key holdouts on the measure, known as the Build Back Better bill. Joe Manchin has repeatedly expressed concern about the legislation's cost, warning a broad spending package will be fiscally irresponsible given rising inflation. And with Republicans united in opposition, all 50 Democrats must pass the bill for it to pass. In a statement, President Biden said, "We will advance this work together over the days and weeks ahead. And Chuck Schumer and I are determined to see the bill successfully on the floor as early as possible." Joe Biden even said we will get a Build Back Better passed. Even in the face of Republican, at the same time, they must also press forward on voting rights legislation and make progress on this as quickly as possible. So it does seem that President Biden can be able to send out the fourth stimulus check very, very soon. What are your thoughts on Joe Manchin, everybody? Will he be able to get the stimulus check sent, or do you think he's holding it back? Tell me in the comments below. And folks, let's not forget that President Biden, he said that he would continue to work to try to convince Manchin, with whom Biden has talked to at least 3 times, to support the measure. And when asked by Fox News on Wednesday whether he will be able to work through issues to hold a vote on the measure before Christmas, Joe Manchin said, "We haven't even gotten anything back from the parliament, so just procedurally we have nothing to vote on." So the House did pass its version of the Build Back Better Act last month in a party line vote, following months of negotiations with progressives and moderates. So the Build Back Better bill passed by the House Democrats would establish universal preschool, expand Medicaid, and provide new funding for child care and offer green energy tax credits, though it notably omits progressive priorities like free community college and Medicare dental care and vision coverage. It relies on $1.95 trillion in new taxes, including a 15% corporate minimum tax rate. So all 50 Democrats will have to support the bill to ensure its passage in the Senate. And while appearing on Yahoo News, Majority Whip Senator Dick Durbin was asked if it is now clear that the Senate will be able to pass the massive $2 trillion 10-year spending bill before Christmas. Let's not forget the surprise stimulus checks for the month of December will be going out tomorrow. $600 and $1,100 stimulus checks are being sent out, and it is official. Batches of stimulus checks started going out on November 29th, and the final payments are expected to be issued by December 17th. California is sending out 803,000 Golden State stimulus checks worth up to $1,100 on December 17th. And those who qualify for the stimulus check will typically get it using a refund option selected on their tax return. Eligible households will receive a stimulus check worth $600 to $1,100. It comes as a check worth up to $6,300 to hundreds of people in Atlanta by December 15th.
Earlier this this week, the White House described talks between the president and Senator Manchin as constructive and productive, but sources on the Hill say that these talks have actually been going, very poorly, and it does now appear that Build Back Better doesn't have a path forward this year. So I'm wondering, how now would you describe the conversations between the two, and what, again, were those areas of productivity earlier this week?
So, we don't go into specifics. We have a policy of not talking about private conversations, and even Manchin said that himself. Person-to-person conversations should be kept private. So the president discussions with lawmakers outside of readouts that we have, usually we keep that promise. So I don't have any more details to offer beyond what we've said this week. The president is determined to get this done as soon as possible. We're talking about cutting costs for American families. We're talking about child care, elder care. We're talking about prescription drugs, lowering the cost of prescription drugs.
Mr. President,
Senator from New Jersey.
as to express my support for the nominations of Ambassador Nicholas Burns to be Ambassador to China, Mr. Ramin Toloui to be an Assistant Secretary of State for Economic and Business Affairs, and Mr. Rashad Hussain to be Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. These are a superb group of highly qualified nominees, deserving of the positions for which they have been nominated, and I'll speak briefly about them. Ambassador Burns is an outstanding public servant, one of the nation's best, and I'm pleased to support his nomination as the next ambassador to China. He has a long and distinguished record in public service, including as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs under the Bush administration and U.S. ambassador to NATO. If there's a place that we need an ambassador, it's China. We've spent so much time, both in committee, on the floor, hearing about the challenges of China, but we don't have a U.S. ambassador to help us meet those challenges. It's no secret that the China of today is challenging the United States and destabilizing the international community in almost every dimension of power, political, diplomatic, economic, military, and even cultural. That's why Ambassador Burns' experience and skills will be crucial as he confronts the monumental task ahead of him. I'm also pleased to be supporting Mr. Ramin Toloui nominations to be the Assistant Secretary for Economic and Business Affairs at the State Department. His experience and skill set, including as a former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for International Finance, where he represented the United States in forums like the G7, will be necessary in order to be an effective Assistant Secretary, especially one that will play such a critical role in our economic diplomacy vis-a-vis China, and as we must reinvigorate the instruments of our economic diplomacy at home. I believe Mr. Toloui represents the importance of getting our economic statecraft right. Lastly, I'm also pleased to support Mr. Rashad Hussain to be our Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. Throughout his impressive public service,
We have some good news, folks, about the fourth stimulus check that you want to know. So be sure to stay until the end of the video. So Joe Biden just announced a new date for when the multi-trillion-dollar social spending bill will finally pass in Congress. So $1,200 stimulus checks, everybody, might be going out to thousands of Americans tomorrow. Get ready for the most important stimulus news that you have to know. So Joe Biden indicated today that he and Democrats likely will not meet their goal of passing his roughly $2 trillion spending bill by the
Now to Capitol Hill, where there are growing signs that Senate Democrats may be temporarily giving up hope of passing the president's human infrastructure bill by New Year's. Instead, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wants to focus on a totally different issue, a massively important one, voting rights. Let's bring in NBC's Sahil Kapoor. Sahil, walk us through what has happened here. It was all about a Christmas deadline for Build Back Better. Now that's temporarily on hold, and voting rights is in focus. Why?
Stephanie, what's happening is Congress appears likely to